This is the best RPG on the N64. According to a shmuplations.com translated interview, Yasumi Matsuno left Quest and joined Squaresoft in 1995. Tactics Ogre was released on October 6, 1995 in Japan. That's not a lot of time to leave your company and see, quote, a job advertisement for a position at Square. I decided I'd go and take their entrance test. So where does that leave Quest? Matsuno took Hiroshi Minagawa and Akihiko Yoshida, the keys to the look of the Ogre Battle series, with him to Squaresoft. So who does that leave Quest with? The director of Ogre Battle 64, person of lordly caliber, was Tatsuya Aziagi, who according to Moby Games was the main programmer on Tactics Ogre and a sub-programmer on Ogre Battle. He never went on to direct another game after this, but was credited as an associate producer on Tactics Ogre, The Night of Lotus. So, is Ogre Battle 64 a game of lordly quality? Why don't you park it and find out? Gameplay. Many of the systems of the original Ogre Battle March of the Black Queen on SNES carry over. The battle system that plays out not until one side is necessarily dead, but after all the unit's attack moves have been spent. The side that deals the most damage or wipes out the opposing side wins the battle. The winner keeps its footing on the battlefield, while the losing team is either wiped out completely or is propelled backwards. The one major exception is when facing off against the stage's main boss unit. The leader of the boss unit must be killed to win the battle, no matter how much more damage you do than they. There's a lot of nuance to this system that I appreciate. If you rewatch my Ogre Battle MOTBQ review, you may recall that the marketing for that Ogre Battle branded the game a simulation RPG. The game design reflects this, because instead of fighting each battle to the death, it is more likely in a war scenario that you would be pushed back and strategically retreat in certain cases. The enemy AI in this version has a tendency to play cautiously by regrouping and recovering at a stronghold, then going back to fight at full health. This may have been true of the previous version, but hey, it's been a while and I don't remember. To increase the simulation aspect, a fatigue stat has been added. As your units travel, they become tired, denoted by a black flag filling up with red. Once it gets about halfway full, the flag starts to fold over, and it is said in the tutorial that exhausted units are less effective. When the flag is fully red, your units will automatically set up camp and be completely defenseless of attack because they'll be sleeping for at least the first turn of combat. If you can get a unit to a town or stronghold that you control, they can regain stamina without having to camp. This is my favorite addition to the gameplay because of the risk/reward dynamic. Special consumables can regain energy as well, but cost money. There are so many different ways to tackle each stage when considering that the enemy has to play by the same rules. Gone also are the fees for deploying units of the first game. Instead, the monetary concerns are focused on those consumable items that you can outfit on your units. You can play it safe, conquering each stronghold in a calculated manner, sending more than enough units, or you can spread your army thin and save time. You could stock up a flying unit with stamina recovery fruit and have them hit the main boss from behind and hope for the best. Your main base is the only other major factor. If Magnus, your main character, is killed or your main base is taken, then you lose. And as we mentioned before, if a unit is dealt more damage in a skirmish, then they are propelled backwards. So if you don't defend your base adequately, you could lose if the enemy gets one unit through and deals enough damage. So maybe put more than one person on your main base. Or there's these things called quit gates. Look them up. My other favorite addition to Ogre Battle 64 is the ability to set up to 2 more waypoints when setting a destination for a unit. This can be used to set up back attacks or to avoid certain terrain your units might battle poorly on. Also useful in exploring for items on the battlefield. Orientation and formation of your units comes into play in delightful ways. Your unit is organized in a 3x3 grid. If you attack head-on, then the squad will look exactly the way it does in the organization menu. But if attacked from the back, then your formation will be oriented the other way. Instead of your healer being at the back where it's most effective, they might now be at the front, open to attack. Most units perform different moves depending on where they are in the grid, so you can customize your formation after a battle after seeing what the enemy did to you. Retreating can be more dangerous because you can't retreat walking backwards. Therefore, your units will be inverted and susceptible to being bum rushed. The equipment system of the first has been greatly expanded, if you can even say the first game had an equipment system. Your units before could hold 1 item, but now your individual units have up to 4 slots to customize depending on their job. The squad sizes are constrained by the same limitations as MOTBQ, with the squads having up to 5 units. Dragons and Beasts, aka Big Boys, take up to 2 of those 5 unit slots, but come with their own advantages. And since you can have up to 10 squads on the field, if you're able to do basic multiplication, you can see there's a lot of pre-battle unit customization and outfitting to be considered before each incursion. Not to mention the class changes and consumable item stocking of each squad. You still don't have direct control of your squad, but you can still issue commands that focus their attacks on certain criteria. The individual units can't attack outside their special range until that range is clear, but with your commands you can prioritize attacking the leader, the weakest opponent, or the strongest opponent if possible. Gone are the tarot cards of the first game that gave special buffs and other cool one-time effects during the battle. In their stead, there are elemental pedras. According to Google, pedra means stone in Spanish. I only had one of the pedras, the one that did the fire spell that sent little flame dogs at random units, but I hear there are many more. The other less obvious gameplay system is the manner in which you free the towns on the map. Clicking on a town shows you its morale. Like the last Ogre Battle, your units have an alignment: law, neutral, or chaos. If you use a law unit to free a town with morale of 67 or greater, then that town is considered liberated. If a neutral or chaos unit frees that town, it's considered captured. Each alignment corresponds to a range of morale. Law equals 67 or above. Neutral equals 34 through 66, and chaos equals 33 or down. Liberating a town raises an unseen variable of the game called chaos frame. Fans of the Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre may be somewhat familiar, but for all normal people,
why are you watching this?
Chaos frame dictates the characters you can recruit and the ending of the game. Things to keep in mind when starting the game. I did a lot of research before playing the game by reading the Intro to the Prima guide and going through the tutorial with Deneb included in the game. I highly recommend both, but I'll highlight a few things I think any prospective Ogre Battle 64 player should know before going into the game. Number 1. The waypoints. As mentioned before, you can set 2 stops on the way for your unit before their ultimate destination. You simply hit A on the place you want to stop at, and instead of hitting A again to confirm, you keep dragging your cursor to the next place, then hit A on that place, and confirm. Number 2, cursor selection type. I believe it's the L button. By hitting that when on the field map, you can alternate between unit, stronghold, and destination. This can make it easier to focus when trying to click on a unit versus a stronghold when one of each is on top of each other. Number 3, Chaos Frame and optional characters. Without hacking, there's no way to get every cool optional character, but if you mess up your Chaos Frame early on and don't have multiple saves, you might find out too late that your Chaos Frame is off and lose, 25 hours or more going back to the start. I didn't play this game with the Prima Guide, and it doesn't help much with recruiting those characters honestly, but if you're anal about FOMO, I would play with a guide from the start. Number 4, get an N64 controller pack. I had one and didn't know how to use it, so if you're like me and this is your first N64 game where you actually want to have more than 2 saves, then it's pretty simple. First, you need an N64 controller pack. They're not too expensive at the moment. With the pack plugged into the back of the controller, hold the start button before and while sliding the power slider of the N64 on. This should take you to a separate menu where you can save and load your save files. Your controller pack saves don't show up in the game on the save screen. They have to be manually saved and loaded during that boot screen. Kind of weird, but since this game is over 20 years old and took me 45 hours, I'd recommend investing in the controller pack so you don't lose all of your progress if your game's battery dies. Number 5, turning off and on battle animations. I don't usually do this in games, but for this game I think it was included with a single button prompt for a reason. If you press the L button during combat, you are given the option to turn off battle animations. After about 20 hours in, I started to cycle back and forth. On battles where there's little danger and you know it's going to take multiple altercations before a result ensues, it comes in handy. Or when you've seen every animation 1,000 times. Battles that are more high stakes though, where you want more time to process each attack and change tactics between each move, then you can put it back on. Huge time saver when things start to get repetitive. Number 6, field pause. If you press start during battle, you'll see the text field pause blink on screen. This means as soon as the battle finishes, you'll have the game pause as you enter into the field map. This is super useful for healing units without accidentally re-engaging the enemy or making split-second adjustments. With that, let's get into the story. Ogre Battle 64 is considered the 6th chapter of the Ogre Battle Saga, with Ogre Battle MOTBQ being Chapter 5 and Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together, Chapter 7. There are some characters from the original Ogre Battle in this game. I will spoil the beginning of the game by reading word for word what the manual tells you about the story. The Holy Lotus Empire, rumored to be planning the domination of the entire continent of Zetagenia. The main character of this game, Magnus Gallant, is an 18-year-old born to a noble family and assigned to the southern division of the Palatinian army. There he witnessed the plight of the lower class, oppressed by the empire and treated as livestock. The nobles have shed their pride and nationalism, now only concerned with the protection of their status by showing loyalty to the Lotus Empire. The upper class is in constant discord, fighting for a better lifestyle, while the lower class lives in despair, stripped of everything. The resentment caused by this disparity reigns over the southern region of Palatinus. In the midst of social disorder, Magnus thwarts the abduction of the prince by a band of lower-class rebels. This is a turning point for Magnus, and for the entire kingdom of Palatinus. Magnus raises the flag of revolution against the kingdom of palaciousness, hoping to rid the land of the Holy Lotus Empire and regain freedom for all people. So you're Magnus Gallant, or whatever the first name you choose, a noble and a knight recently graduated from the military academy. Sound familiar? The story takes on some of the darker political themes of Tactics Ogre, like race and class inequality, and the way it presents those scenes is a vast improvement over the plain dialogue boxes of the first Ogre Battle. But it's clear Matsuno is gone when it comes to the directing of those scenes and the depth of the themes being explored. The Battlefield story exchanges are limited to town information lore tidbits and boss fight compulsory villain-splaining. On a battlefield that takes in-game days to traverse, it makes sense that enemies aren't yelling important story dialogue at you, so I'll give that part of the game a pass. Most of the story takes place between the battles and cutscenes, and half of the time it's Hugo the tactician explaining the battle plan in the same war room the entire game. The main issue with the story is the lack of character development aside from Magnus. Dio, who is your begrudging number 2 man, is introduced as a Kuwabara type in glorious fashion, and early on seems like he's going to be involved heavily in the plot, and then suddenly he's not considered essential. Possibly a side effect of him being able to die in battle? There are only about 2 successfully executed relationships in the game, and that's between the main character and his father, and the main character and his childhood friend. But overall, I enjoyed this story, but just don't go in expecting the next Tactics Ogre or Final Fantasy Tactics. I'll go more in-depth analyzing the story with all the spoilers once I finish Tactics Ogre The Night of Lotus and chart the story of the entire series in a future video. Far in the future.
Graphics.
If Final Fantasy Tactics dared to ask, what if? No knows. Then Ogre Battle 64 decided to take it one step forward and say, what if? No nose. And no mouth.
Describe him to me!
I really like the aesthetic of Ogre Battle 64. Maybe it's because games now look more and more homogenized, using the same fonts and the same engines. Nothing looks like Ogre Battle 64 except Ogre Battle 64, and nothing will probably ever again. The character models are weird, digitized, smooth 3D, and the backgrounds of the battles are pre-rendered. The characters in cutscene dialogue boxes are portrayed in pixel art, and the battlefield is 3D, but seen from a top-down perspective that can be inclined slightly, but is pretty primitive in order to display things clearly on the N64. Nintendo's website at the time of the game's release said it was the second largest N64 cartridge ever released. According to my research, the largest at the time probably was Resident Evil 2. Conker's Bad Fur Day and Pokemon Stadium 2 would go on to be larger as well, but size isn't everything, okay?
I was in the pool!
Music. The Ogre Battle MOTBQ music team is back, baby. Hitachi Sakamoto, Masaharu Iwata, and Hayato Matsuo reunite, even if Matsuno couldn't make the party. Hayato Matsuo missed Tactics Ogre and wasn't invited to the Final Fantasy Tactics party, apparently, but returns here. The soundtrack clocks in at 1 hour and 11 minutes, with returning tunes from the previous Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre game. Matsuo's tracks do stand out, at least to me, maybe as a result of listening to thousands of hours of Sakamoto and Iwata scores. Matsuo's style just sounds different. Sometimes less heavy than the other two, other times just as much but with a more manic feel. Matsuo's tracks have a more liberal use of choral samples. The only downside of the soundtrack is that the battles, especially early on, don't last very long, so you hear the same 15 seconds of certain battle themes over and over. Given the gameplay, this is a hard thing to avoid. The soundtrack was released commercially with 2 extra discs of MIDI-enhanced versions if you can't get enough Ogre eargasms. Check it out. In conclusion, Ogre Battle 64, person of lordly caliber, is better than it has any right to be. Even robbed of key talent from Tactics Ogre, the remaining Quest Corporation is able to pull off a game of, I dare say, lordly caliber. And this game, at least when I bought it, was pretty cheap. Now it's only, oh fuck. At least you can still download it on the Wii U. Oh fuck. I guess just sign up for that Nintendo expansion pack and hope for the best. On the next episode, of the tactical RPG Odyssey, the Diofield Chronicles. This game... I already fucked it up. This RPG is the best RPG on the N64.